Okay, tonight is the 21st of July and we are on the 6th night of the Dīgha Nikāya talks. Tonight we come to Sutta number 9, Potthapada Sutta. This sutta is about states of consciousness. Thus have I heard. Once the Lord was staying at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park, and at that time the wanderer Potthapada was at the debating hall near the Tinduka tree, in the single hall park of Queen Malika, with a large crowd of about 300 wanderers. Then the Lord, rising early, took his robe and bowl and went to Savatthi for alms. But it occurred to him, it is too early to go to Savatthi for alms. Suppose I were to go to the debating hall to see the wanderer Potthapada. And he did so. There Potthapada was sitting with his crowd of wanderers, all shouting and making a great commotion, indulging in various kinds of unedifying conversation, such as about kings, robbers, ministers, armies, dangers, wars, food, drink, clothes, beds, garlands, perfumes, relatives, carriages, villages, towns and cities, countries, women, heroes, street and well gossip, talk of the departed, desultory chat, speculations about land and sea, talk about being and non-being. But Potthapada saw the Lord coming from a distance, and so he called his followers to order, saying, "Be quiet, gentlemen. Don't make a noise, gentlemen. That ascetic Gotama is coming, and he likes quiet and speaks in praise of quiet. If he sees that this company is quiet, he will most likely want to come and visit us." At this, the wanderers fell silent. Then the Lord came to Potthapada, who said, "Come, Reverend Lord. Welcome, Reverend Lord. At last the Reverend Lord has gone out of his way to come here. Be seated, Lord. A seat is prepared." The Lord sat down on the prepared seat, and Potthapada took a low stool and sat down to one side. The Lord said, "Potthapada, what were you all talking about? What conversation have I interrupted?" Potthapada replied, "Lord, never mind the conversation we were having just now. It will not be difficult for the Lord to hear about that later. In the past few days, Lord, the discussion among the ascetics and Brahmins of various schools, sitting together and meeting in the debating hall, has concerned the higher extinction of consciousness and how this takes place. Some said, once perceptions arise and cease without cause or condition. When they arise, one is conscious. When they cease, one is unconscious. That is how they explained it. But somebody else said, no, that is not how it is. Perceptions are a person's self, which comes and goes. When it comes, one is conscious. When it goes, one is unconscious. Another said, that is not how it is. There are ascetics and Brahmins of great powers, of great influence. They draw down consciousness into a man and withdraw it. When they draw it down into him, he is conscious. When they withdraw it, he is unconscious. And another said, no, that is not how it is. There are deities of great powers, of great influence. They draw down consciousness into a man and withdraw it. When they draw it down into him, he is conscious. When they withdraw it, he is unconscious. It was in this connection that I thought of the Lord. Surely the Blessed Lord, the Welfarer, He is supremely skilled about these matters. The Blessed Lord well understands the higher extinction of consciousness. What then, Lord, is this higher extinction of consciousness? In this matter, Potthapada, those ascetics and Brahmins who say once perceptions arise and cease without cause or condition are totally wrong. Why is that? Once perceptions arise and cease owing to a cause and condition. There are some perceptions arise through training and some pass away through training. What is this training, the Lord? What is this training? The Lord said, Potthapada, a Tathagata arises in this world, an Arahant, Sammasambuddha, endowed with wisdom and conduct, Welfarer, knower of the worlds, incomparable trainer of men to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened and blessed. He, having realized it by his own super knowledge, proclaims this world with its devas, maras and brahmas, its princes and people. He preaches the Dhamma, which is lovely in its beginning, lovely in its middle, lovely in its ending, in the spirit and in the letter, and displays the fully perfected and purified holy life. A disciple goes forth and practices the moralities, etc. This is in Sutta number 2. That for him is morality. And then Potthapada, that monk who is perfected in morality, sees no danger from any side, etc., etc. In this way, he is perfected in morality. He guards the sense doors, etc., as in also in Sutta 2, and goes through the various stages of charana, conduct or practice of the holy life. And then having reached the first jhana, he remains in it. And whatever sensations of lust that he previously had disappeared. At that time, there is present a true but subtle perception of delight and happiness, born of detachment, and he becomes one who is conscious of this delight and happiness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training, and some pass away through training. And this is that training, said the Lord. Stop here for a moment. This part is interesting. First, the Buddha says when a person attains the first jhana, whatever sensations of lust that he previously had disappear. Now, we went through the Sutta number 2, where the Buddha said that even before a monk attains the first jhana, the 5 hindrances disappear. But that state, the upachara samadhi, is very near to jhana. And so after that he enters the first jhana, and when he comes out of it also, the 5 hindrances are not there, like we mentioned. But that is a criterion. Some people say they have attained jhana, but the anger is still very strong. The lust is also very strong. If they have attained the first jhana, the 5 hindrances, even when they come out of it, the 5 hindrances are no more hindrances. As I mentioned, they are so low that they don't hinder a person anymore. They don't obsess the mind. When they obsess the mind, they are called hindrances. When they don't, they are not called hindrances. So that is a standard. Some people, you can judge. Some people, they go for retreat and then the teacher says they have attained 4 jhanas. Some even say they have attained 8 jhanas. The teacher says so. But when we observe them, we find their anger is still very strong. Then definitely I don't think they have attained any jhana. Then the other thing interesting here, there is a true but subtle perception of delight and happiness. This piti and sukha is a subtle perception. A lot of people never study the suttas and believe what the later books say. The later books like the Visuddhimagga, they talk about different types of rapture. Which is a translation for piti. Here it says delight. So they say they are strong, very strong. Piti can overwhelm a person and all this thing. But you look here, the Buddha says this piti and sukha actually is a very subtle perception. But even though it's very subtle, the monk who enters this first jhana, he's conscious of this piti and sukha, delight and happiness. Which shows the state of the first jhana, that person when in the jhana, his mind is he's very aware. He's not like some people say, what's the use of jhana? When you enter jhana, you're not mindful. But in jhana, a person is never as mindful as when he is in jhana. The mind is very sharp and very strong and fully aware of whatever is happening. So here, even the delight and happiness is subtle. He is very aware of it, very conscious of it. So here the Buddha is saying that some perceptions arise through training and some pass away through training. The one that pass away is the sensations of lust has passed away. And those that arise is like this piti and sukha, delight and happiness. Again, among the subsiding of this one is, here it says thinking and pondering. I prefer thought directed and sustained. This is vitaka and vichara. Among with the subsiding of thought directed and sustained, by gaining inner tranquility and unity of mind, reaches and remains in the second jhana, which is free from thought directed and sustained, born of concentration, filled with delight and happiness. His former true but subtle perception of delight and happiness, born of detachment, vanishes. At that time there arises a true but subtle perception of delight and happiness, born of concentration. And he becomes one who is conscious of this delight and happiness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training and some pass away through training. Stop here for a moment. So the perception that pass away is firstly the thought directed and sustained, and then also the subtle perception of delight and happiness born of detachment. And the one that arises is the subtle perception of delight and happiness born of concentration. Again, after the fading away of delight, he dwells in equanimity, mindful and clearly aware, and he experiences in his body that pleasant feeling of which the noble ones say, "Happy dwells the man of equanimity and mindfulness." And he reaches and remains in the third jhana. His former true but subtle sense of delight and happiness, born of concentration, vanishes, and there arises at that time a true but subtle sense of equanimity and happiness, and he becomes one who is conscious of this true but subtle sense of equanimity and happiness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training and some pass away through training. Again, with the abandonment of pleasure and pain and with the disappearance of previous joy and grief, he reaches and remains in the fourth jhana, a state beyond pleasure and pain, with utter purity of equanimity and mindfulness. His former true but subtle sense of equanimity and happiness vanishes, and there arises a true but subtle sense of neither happiness nor unhappiness, and he becomes one who is conscious of this true but subtle sense of neither happiness nor unhappiness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training, and some pass away through training. So this description up to the fourth jhana. Again, by passing entirely beyond bodily sensations, by the disappearance of all sense of resistance, and by non-attraction to the perception of diversity, seeing that space is infinite, he reaches and remains in the sphere of infinite space. In this way, some perceptions arise through training, and some pass away through training. Stop here for a moment. As I mentioned before in my earlier talks, that when a person attains this first arupa or arupa jhana, here it says, passing entirely beyond bodily sensations, means that the five sense doors close. There is no seeing, there is no hearing, smell, taste, touch. These five senses close. That's why then only he enters the arupas. Again, by passing entirely beyond the sphere of infinite space, seeing that consciousness is infinite, he reaches and remains in the sphere of infinite consciousness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training and some pass away through training. Again, by passing entirely beyond the sphere of infinite consciousness, seeing that there is no thing, he reaches and remains in the sphere of no-thingness, and he becomes one who is conscious of this true but subtle perception of the sphere of no-thingness. In this way, some perceptions arise through training, and some pass away through training. And this is that training, said the Lord. So here the Buddha describes up to the sphere of nothingness or no-thingness. And also you notice here, those perceptions are subtle. Even the this perception of no-thingness, of this subtle perception of the sphere of nothingness. Potthapada, from the moment when the monk has gained this controlled perception, he proceeds from stage to stage till he reaches the limit of perception. When he has reached the limit of perception, it occurs to him, mental activity is worse for me. Lack of mental activity is better. If I were to think and imagine, these perceptions would cease, and coarser perceptions would arise in me. Suppose I were not to think or imagine. So he neither thinks nor imagines, and then in him just these perceptions arise. but other causal perceptions do not arise. He attains cessation. And that Potthapada is the way in which the cessation of perception is brought about by successive steps. Stop here for a moment. When a person attains cessation of perception, it also means that he attains cessation of consciousness. Because the sutta say, once a person has consciousness, it must come together with the other aggregates, making the five aggregates. And so that's why when perceptions cease, consciousness, feeling, etc. cease. So you look how the Buddha describes how to attain this cessation of perception. This monk, he attains to a high stage, reaches the limit of perception. He goes through the sphere of nothingness, and after that, this neither perception nor non-perception, and that is the very limit. And then he decides that not to think or imagine. This, if you remember the dependent origination, the 12 links of dependent origination, avijja paccaya sankhara, sankhara paccaya viññāṇaṃ, ignorance conditions sankhara. Sankhara I like to translate as volition, and volition conditions viññāṇa, which is consciousness. So if a person has any volition at all, consciousness will start. And this volition is the desire for anything, the desire to live, the desire to speak, the desire to think, etc. Just as like you want to move your hand. Before you can move your hand, you must have the desire to move your hand, right? The intention, right? And then only you can move your hand. So similarly, for anything to happen, there must be the volition, and that is sankhara. So once you have sankhara, any desire at all, then consciousness will flow, and samsara will continue. That's why when a person wants to attain liberation, he will give up desire for anything, even his life also, he gives up. And then only the mind will stop working. So here, that's why the Buddha says, he decides not to think or imagine, just don't want the mind to do anything, to act at all. Then the perceptions do not arise. So the only perception he has is that he is aware that he doesn't want to think, doesn't want to move his mind. So when he doesn't want to move his mind, I guess after some time he attains cessation, the mind stops working. What do you think, Potthapada? Have you heard of this before? No, Lord. As I understand it, the Lord has said, Potthapada, from the moment when the monk has gained this controlled perception, he proceeds from stage to stage until he reaches the limit of perception, etc., etc. And that is the way in which the cessation of perception is brought about by successive steps. And the Buddha said, that is right, Potthapada. Stop here for a moment. So you see here, Potthapada has been paying careful attention that whatever the Buddha described, he can repeat exactly what the Buddha said. Lord, do you teach that the summit of perception is just one or that it is many? And the Buddha said, I teach it as both one and many. Lord, how is it one and how is it many? And the Buddha said, according as he attains successively to the cessation of each perception, so I teach the summit of that perception. Thus I teach both one summit of perception, and I also teach many. Lord, does perception arise before knowledge, or knowledge arise before perception, or do both arise simultaneously? And the Buddha said, perception arises first, Potthapada, then knowledge, and from the arising of perception comes the arising of knowledge, and one knows, thus conditioned, knowledge arises. In this way, you can see how perception arises first, and then knowledge, and from the arising of perception comes the arising of knowledge. Stop here for a moment. So you must have perception or consciousness first before you can have knowledge. Lord, is perception a person's self, or is perception one thing and self another? Well, Potthapada, do you postulate a self? Lord, I postulate a gross self, material, composed of the four elements and feeding on solid food. And the Buddha said, but with such a gross self, Potthapada, perception would be one thing and the self another. You can see that in this way. Given such a gross self, certain perceptions would arise in a person and others pass away. In this way, you can see that perception must be one thing and the self another. Stop here for a moment. So here, Potthapada is asking the Buddha whether perception is self or not. And the Buddha said, you believe in a self? And he said, he believes in a gross self, a material self. Then the Buddha said, in that case, if that is the self you postulate, then perception must be one thing and self another. Then he changed his mind. Then he says, now, Lord, I postulate a mind-made self, complete with all its parts, not defective in any sense organ. And the Buddha said, well, with such a mind-made self, perception would be one thing and the self another. Then he says, Lord, I assume a formless self made up of perception. And the Buddha said, but with such a formless self, perception would be one thing and self another. But Lord, is it possible for me to know whether perception is a person's self or whether perception is one thing and self another? And the Buddha said, Potthapada, it is difficult for one of different views, of different faith, under different influences, with different pursuits and a different training, to know whether these are two different things or not. Stop here for a moment. So here he's asking the Buddha whether he can know whether perception and self are the same or different. And the Buddha said, you belong to another sect, you belong to a different training, and so it's difficult for you to know. Well, Lord, if this question of self and perceptions is difficult for one like me, tell me, is the world eternal? Is only this true and the opposite false? Potthapada, I have not declared that the world is eternal and that the opposite view is false. Well, Lord, is the world not eternal? And the Buddha said, I have not declared that the world is not eternal. Well, Lord, is the world infinite or not infinite? And the Buddha said, I have not declared that the world is not infinite or infinite, and that the opposite view is false. Well, Lord, is the soul and the same as the body, or is the soul one thing and the body another? Again, the Buddha says, I have not declared that the soul is one thing and the body another. Well, Lord, does the Tathagata exist after death? Is only this true and all else false? And the Buddha again says, I have not declared this. Well, Lord, does the Tathagata not exist after death, or both exist and not exist after death, or neither exist nor not exist after death? And to all these, the Buddha says, I have not declared that the Tathagata either exists or not exists, or in any other way. But Lord, why has the Lord not declared these things? Potthapada, that is not conducive to the purpose, not conducive to Dhamma, not the way to embark on the holy life. It does not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to calm, to high knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana. That is why I have not declared it. Stop here for a moment. So to all these questions, the Buddha says he has no answer. Doesn't want to say yes or no. And when the Potthapada asked him why, he said because it doesn't help in the holy life. It's unbeneficial. Whether you believe in it or you don't believe in it, you don't get anything out of it. It's just a view only. But Lord, what has the Lord declared? Potthapada, I have declared this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. And this is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. But Lord, why has the Lord declared this? Because, Potthapada, this is conducive to the purpose, conducive to Dhamma, the way to embark on the holy life. It leads to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to calm, to higher knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. That is why I have declared it. So it is, Lord, so it is, welfarer. And now is the time for the Blessed Lord to do as he sees fit. Then the Lord rose from his seat and went away. Then the wanderers, as soon as the Lord had left, reproached, sneered and jeered at Potthapada from all sides, saying, whatever the ascetic Gotama says, Potthapada agrees with him. So it is, Lord, so it is, welfarer. We don't understand a word of the ascetic Gotama's whole discourse. Is the world eternal or not? Is it finite or infinite? Is the soul the same as the body or different? Does the Tathagata exist after death or not, or both or neither? Potthapada replied, I don't understand either about whether the world is eternal or not, or whether the Tathagata exists after death or not, or both or either. But the ascetic Gotama teaches a true and real way of practice which is consonant with Dhamma and grounded in Dhamma. And why should not a man like me express approval of such a true and real practice, so well taught by the ascetic Gotama? Stop here for a moment. So you see, his disciples could not follow the Buddha's Dhamma, could not follow the Buddha's argument at all. And they were annoyed that Potthapada agrees with the Buddha. 2 or 3 days later, Citta, the son of the elephant trainer, went with Potthapada to see the Lord. Citta prostrated himself before the Lord and sat down to one side. Potthapada exchanged courtesies with the Lord, sat down to one side and told him what had happened. And the Buddha said, Potthapada, all those wanderers are blind and sightless. You alone among them are sighted. Some things I have taught and pointed out, Potthapada, as being certain, others as being uncertain. What are the things I have pointed out as uncertain? The world is eternal. I have declared it to be uncertain. The Tathagata exists after death, etc. Why? Because they are not conducive to Nibbana. That's why I have declared them as uncertain. But what things have I pointed out as certain? This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Why? Because they are conducive to the purpose, conducive to Dhamma, the way to embark on the holy life. They lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to calm, to higher knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana. That is why I have declared them as certain. Potthapada, there are some ascetics and Brahmins who declare and believe that after death the self is entirely happy and free from disease. I'll stop here for a moment. So here, even nowadays, there are some people like to believe, as their religion says, that after death they are in heaven and they are entirely happy, free from sickness and all kinds of dukkha. It's a promise which people like to believe. I approached them and asked if this was indeed what they declared and believed, and they replied, yes. Then I said, do you friends living in the world know and see it as an entirely happy place? And they replied, no. I said, have you ever experienced a single night or day, or half a night or day that was entirely happy? And they replied, no. I said, do you know a path or a practice whereby an entirely happy world might be brought about? And they replied, no. I said, have you heard the voices of deities who have been reborn in an entirely happy world, saying, the attainment of an entirely happy world has been well and rightly gained, and we, gentlemen, have been reborn in such a realm? And they replied, no. What do you think, Potthapada? Such being the case, does not the talk of those ascetics and Brahmins turn out to be stupid? It is just as if a man were to say, I am going to seek out and love the most beautiful girl in the country. They might say to him, well, as to this most beautiful girl in the country, do you know whether she belongs to the Khattiya, the Brahmin, the merchant, or the artisan class? And he would say, no. Then they might say, well, do you know her name, her clan, whether she is tall or short, or of medium height, whether she is dark or light complexioned, or sallow-skinned, or what village or town or city she comes from? And he would say, no. And they might say, well then, you don't know or see the one you seek for and desire. And he would say, no. Does not the talk of such a man turn out to be stupid? Certainly, Lord. So it is with those ascetics and Brahmins who declare and believe that after death the self is entirely happy and free from disease. Does not their talk turn out to be stupid? Certainly, Lord. It is as if a man were to build a staircase for a palace at a crossroads. People might say to him, well now, this staircase for a palace that you are building, do you know whether the palace will face east or west, or north or south, or whether it will be high or low or of medium height? And he would say no. And they might say, well then, you don't know or see what kind of a palace you are building the staircase for? And he would say no. Don't you think that man's talk would turn out to be stupid? Certainly, Lord. Stop here for a moment. So here, the Buddha is saying that there are some people who believe that after death they'll be entirely happy with no sickness whatsoever, 100% happy. Then the Buddha asks whether they know anything about that state, whether they have met anybody who came back from that place and all that. And they said no. So then the Buddha said, it's just stupid talk, just like a person claims to love the most beautiful girl in the country but never met her, doesn't know whether she's tall or short or fair or dark or anything. And similarly, a person who wants to build a staircase for a palace but he doesn't know what the palace looks like, where to put the staircase also he doesn't know. So the Buddha says all this is stupid talk. Potthapada, there are three kinds of acquired self or presumed self. The gross acquired self, the mind-made acquired self, the formless acquired self. What is the gross acquired self? It has form, is composed of the four great elements, nourished by material food. What is the mind-made self? It has form, complete with all its parts, not defective in any sense or organ. What is the formless acquired self? It is without form and made up of perception. But I teach a doctrine for getting rid of the gross acquired self, whereby defiling mental states disappear, and states tending to purification grow strong, and one gains and remains in the purity and perfection of wisdom here and now, having realized and attained it by one's own super-knowledge. Now, Potthapada, you might think, perhaps these defiling mental states might disappear, and one might still be unhappy. That is not how it should be regarded. If defiling states disappear, nothing but happiness and delight develops, tranquility, mindfulness and clear awareness, and that is a happy state. I also teach a doctrine for getting rid of the mind-made acquired self. I also teach a doctrine for getting rid of the formless acquired self. Potthapada, if others ask us, what friend is this gross acquired self whose abandonment you preach? Being so asked, we should reply, this is that gross acquired self for the getting rid of which we teach a doctrine. If others ask us, what is this mind-made acquired self? Similarly, the Buddha says, this is that mind-made acquired self. If others ask us, what is this formless acquired self? What do you think, Potthapada? Similarly, the Buddha says that this is that acquired self. What do you think, Potthapada? Does not that statement turn out to be well-founded? Certainly, Lord. It is as if a man were to build a staircase for a palace which was below that palace, and they might say to him, well now, this staircase for a palace that you are building, do you know whether the palace will face east or west or north or south, or whether it will be high, low or of medium height? And he would say, this staircase is right under the palace. Don't you think that man's statement would be well-founded? Certainly, Lord. In just the same way, Potthapada, if others ask us, what is this gross acquired self? What is this mind-made acquired self? What is this formless acquired self? We reply, this is that gross or mind-made or formless acquired self, for the getting rid of which we teach a doctrine, whereby defiling mental states disappear, and states tending to purification grow strong, and one gains and remains in the purity and perfection of wisdom here and now, having realized and attained it by one's own super-knowledge. Don't you think that statement is well-founded? Certainly, Lord. At this, Chitta, son of the elephant trainer, said to the Lord, Lord, whenever the gross acquired self is present, would it be wrong to assume the existence of the mind-made acquired self or of the formless acquired self? Does only the gross acquired self truly exist then? And similarly with the mind-made acquired self and the formless acquired self. And the Buddha said, Chitta, whenever the gross acquired self is present, we do not at that time speak of the mind-made acquired self. We do not speak of a formless acquired self. We speak only of a gross acquired self. Whenever the mind-made acquired self is present, we speak only of a mind-made acquired self. And whenever the formless acquired self is present, we speak only of a formless acquired self. Chitta, suppose they were to ask you, did you exist in the past or didn't you? Will you exist in the future or won't you? Do you exist now or don't you? How would you answer? Lord, if I were asked such a question, I would say, I did exist in the past. I did not exist. I shall exist in the future. I shall not exist. I do exist now. I do not exist. That, Lord, would be my answer. But Chitta, if they ask, the past acquired self that you had, is that your only true acquired self? Or are future and present ones false? Or is the one you will have in the future the only true one, and are the past and present ones false? Or is your present acquired self the only true one, and are the past and future ones false? How would you reply? Lord, if they ask me these things, I would reply, my past acquired self was at the time my only true one. The future and present ones were false. My future acquired self will then be the only true one. The past and present ones will be false. My present acquired self is now the only true one. The past and future ones are false. That is how I would reply. In just the same way, Chitta, whenever the gross acquired self is present, we do not at that time speak of a mind-made acquired self or of a formless acquired self. In just the same way, Chitta, from the cow we get milk, from the milk curds, from the curds butter, from the butter ghee, and from the ghee cream of ghee. And when there is milk, we don't speak of curds, of butter, of ghee, or of cream, or of ghee. We speak of milk. When there are curds, we don't speak of butter, etc. When there is cream of ghee, we speak only of cream of ghee. So too, whenever the gross acquired self is present, we do not speak of the mind-made or formless acquired self. Whenever the mind-made acquired self is present, we do not speak of the gross or formless acquired self. Whenever the formless acquired self is present, we do not speak of the gross acquired self or the mind-made acquired self. We speak of the formless acquired self. But Chitta, these are merely names, expressions, turns of speech, designations in common use in the world, which the Tathagata uses without misapprehending them. And at these words, Potthapada, the wanderer, said to the Lord, Excellent Lord, excellent. It is as if someone were to set up what had been knocked down, or to point out the way to one who had got lost, or to bring an oil lamp into a dark place so that those with eyes could see what was there. Just so the Blessed Lord has expounded the Dhamma in various ways. Lord, I go for refuge to the Lord, the Dhamma and the Sangha. May the Lord accept me as a lay follower who has taken refuge in Him from this day forth, as long as life shall last. But Chitta, son of the elephant trainer, said to the Lord, Excellent Lord, excellent. It is as if someone were to set up what had been knocked down, or to point out the way to one who had got lost, or to bring an oil lamp into a dark place, so that those with eyes could see what was there. Just so the Blessed Lord has expounded the Dhamma in various ways. Lord, I go for refuge to the Lord, the Dhamma and the Sangha. May I, Lord, receive the going forth at the Lord's hands. May I receive ordination. And Chitta, son of the elephant trainer, received the going forth at the Lord's hands and the ordination. And the newly ordained Venerable Chitta, alone, secluded, unwearying, zealous and resolute, in a short time attained to that for the sake of which young men of good birth go forth from the household life into homelessness, that unexcelled culmination of the holy life, having realized it here and now by his own super knowledge, and dwelt therein, knowing birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is nothing further here. And Venerable Chitta, son of the elephant trainer, became another of the Arahants. That's the end of the sutta. So here we find that the Buddha explained how this perception can cease through the various stages of the jhanas. Firstly, the rupa jhanas, and then the arupas. Then later the Buddha explains how people who have certain beliefs, like this belief of some ascetics and Brahmins, that after death the self is entirely happy and free from disease, that they only believe there's no basis for it. Even in this present life, they can't attain what they think they are going to attain. So how can they attain it in the future? So after this, you see this Potthapada. He just took refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. But Chitta not only took refuge, he requested the going forth, and the Buddha accepted him. I don't know whether I have time for another sutta. This looks not too long. We'll try. We come to sutta number 10, Suba Sutta, about Suba, morality, concentration, and wisdom. Okay, Dīgha Nikāya Sutta number 10, Suba Sutta. Thus have I heard. Once the Venerable Ananda was staying at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park, shortly after the Lord's final passing. And at that time, the youth Suba, Dīgha's son, was staying at Savatthi on some business. Stop here for a moment. So from here, from this beginning, you can tell that this sutta was after the Buddha's parinibbana, after the Buddha's passing away. And Suba said to a certain young man, "Go, my lad, to where the ascetic Ananda is. Ask him in my name if he is in good health, free from fatigue, strong, vigorous, and dwelling in comfort, and say, it would be good if the Reverend Ananda would, out of compassion, visit the dwelling of Suba, the son of Dīgha." "Very good, sir," replied the young man. Then he went to the Venerable Ananda, exchanged courtesies with him, and sat down to one side. Then he delivered the message. Venerable Ananda replied, "It is not the right time, young man. Today I have taken some medicine. Perhaps it will be possible to come tomorrow, when the time and the occasion are suitable." And the young man rose, returned to Suba, and reported what had passed between him and the Venerable Ananda, adding, "My mission has been thus far accomplished, that the Reverend Ananda would probably take the opportunity to come tomorrow." Stop here for a moment. So here you see this Suba, today's son, he wants to talk to Venerable Ananda, and he invited Venerable Ananda to come to his house. But that doesn't seem to be very polite. If he has the interest to speak to Venerable Ananda, he should go and visit Venerable Ananda instead of asking Venerable Ananda to come to him. And indeed, as that night was ending, the Venerable Ananda, dressed in the early morning, took his robe and bowl, and accompanied by the Venerable Cetaka, came to Suba's dwelling and sat down on the prepared seat. Then Suba approached the Venerable Ananda, exchanged courtesies with him, and sat down to one side. Stop here for a moment. You see, this in the suttas and the Vinaya, when we find that when a senior monk goes out, generally he will, or any monk goes out, he generally he's accompanied by another monk. And usually if a senior monk goes out, he'll bring a new monk, a young monk to accompany him and to serve him. This is also the tradition in the forest monasteries of Thailand. Then Suba said, "Reverend Ananda was for a long time the Reverend Gotama's personal attendant. Dwelling in his presence and near him, You, Reverend Ananda, would know what things the Reverend Gautama praised, and with which he aroused, exhorted, and established people. Which, Reverend Ananda, were those things? And the Reverend Ananda said, Suba, there were 3 divisions of things which the Lord praised, and with which he aroused, exhorted, and established people. Which 3? The division of Aryan morality, Sila, the division of Aryan concentration, Samadhi, and the division of Aryan wisdom, Panya. These were the 3 divisions of things which the Lord praised, and with which he aroused, exhorted, and established people. One moment, these 3 things, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, are also basically the divisions found in the Noble Eightfold Path. Under the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, the 8 factors can be divided into 3 also, grouped into 3. And he said, well, Reverend Ananda, what is the division of Aryan morality which the Reverend Gautama praised? And Reverend Ananda said, young sir, a Tathagata arises in the world, Arahant Sammasambuddha, endowed with wisdom and conduct, well-farer, knower of the worlds, incomparable trainer of men to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened and blessed. He, having realized it by his own super-knowledge, proclaims this world with its devas, maras and brahmas, its princes and people. He preaches the Dhamma which is lovely in its beginning, lovely in its middle, and lovely in its ending, in the spirit and in the letter, and displays the fully perfected and purified holy life. A disciple goes forth and practices the moralities. This description of the moralities are as in Sutta number 2, verses 41 to 63. Thus a monk is perfected in morality. That is the division of Aryan morality which the Lord praised. But something more remains to be done. It is wonderful, Reverend Ananda. It is marvelous. This division of Aryan morality is perfectly fulfilled, not left incomplete. And I do not see this division of Aryan morality fulfilled thus anywhere among the ascetics and Brahmins of other schools. And if any of them were to have found this perfection in themselves, they would have been so delighted that they would have said, we have done enough. The goal of our asceticism has been reached. There is nothing more to be done. And yet the Reverend Ananda declares that there is more to be done. Stop here for a moment. So, what this Suba is saying is what nowadays also we find. There are certain monks, they are very sticky about the Vinaya, the moral conduct, and they go into, sometimes they split hairs, go into very detail, and seem to be very fussy about certain rules and all that. And they stop there, just like this Subha says, they think they have perfected the holy life, and they don't go beyond Sila. But as Reverend Ananda says, there's more to be done. Reverend Ananda, what is the division of Aryan concentration which the Reverend Gautama praised? And then Reverend Ananda now goes into a description of the other factors under Charana, the practice or conduct of the holy life. Things like guarding the 6 sense doors, practicing sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear awareness, contentment, moderation in eating, devoted to wakefulness, the 7 good qualities, satta saddhamma, seclusion, aloofness from society, going to live in a secluded place, and aranya, and then practicing meditation and attain the abandonment of the 5 hindrances, and then after that attain the 4 jhanas. That is the division of Aryan concentration which the Lord praised. But something more remains to be done. So here, after explaining the process by which a monk practices charana, the conduct or practice of the holy life, and attains the 4 jhanas, remember Ananda says there's still more to be done. And Subha said, it is wonderful, Reverend Ananda, it is marvelous. This division of Aryan concentration is perfectly fulfilled, not left incomplete. and do not see this division of Aryan concentration fulfilled thus anywhere among the ascetics and Brahmins of other schools. And if any of them were to have found this perfection in themselves, they would have been so delighted that they would have said, "We have done enough. The goal of our asceticism has been reached. There is nothing more to be done." And yet the Reverend Ananda declares that there is more to be done. This development of samadhi, in the earlier sutta we read, I think yesterday, it was development of the mind. In the previous sutta we heard about development of morality, development of the mind, citta, and development of wisdom. So this samadhi is actually development of mind. Development of mind, the term is bhavana, development. And development of mind, you find here, always culminates in the 4 jhanas. When a person attains the 4 jhanas, the mind becomes developed, because he has got rid of the 5 hindrances, and not only that, the mind is in such a high state that it becomes pliant, malleable, and wieldy. And in that state, after attaining that state, the mind is workable, and you can use it in whatever way you want. Just like some monks are having attained the 4th jhana, the psychic powers come, and they can walk through the wall. If they want those psychic powers, they can acquire those psychic powers, like the heavenly eye, they can see heaven, they can see hell. The heavenly ear, they can listen to the sounds of ghosts and devas and all that. That is provided they want to develop it. And then memory of past lives, reading other people's minds, etc. So that is the development of the mind, which is basically attainment of the 4 jhanas. Reverend Ananda, what is the division of Aryan wisdom which the Reverend Gautama praised? So here, Venerable Ananda describes the use, how a monk uses the 4 jhanas, attains contemplation, knowledge, attains a mind-made body, attains a heavenly eye, attains a heavenly ear, attains a memory of past lives, attains the ability to read others' minds, and the various types of psychic powers, like flying through the air, passing through the wall, etc. And finally, attainment of the destruction of the asavas, the destruction of the tendency of the mind to flow, which is basically liberation. And then there is nothing further here, the Venerable Ananda says. That is the division of Aryan wisdom which the Lord praised, with which He aroused, exhorted and established people. Beyond that, there is nothing to be done. And Suba said, "It is wonderful, Reverend Ananda. It is marvelous. This division of Aryan wisdom is perfectly fulfilled, not left incomplete. And do not see this division of Aryan wisdom fulfilled thus anywhere among the ascetics and Brahmins of other schools. And there is nothing further to be done. Excellent, Reverend Ananda, excellent. It is as if someone were to set up what had been knocked down, or to point out the way to one who had got lost, or to bring an oil lamp into a dark place, so that those with eyes could see what was there. Just so the Venerable Ananda expounded the Dhamma in various ways." Reverend Ananda, I go for refuge to the Lord Buddha Gautama, the Dhamma and the Sangha. May the Reverend Ananda accept me as a lay follower who has taken refuge from this day forth as long as life shall last. That's the end of the sutta. You notice here in the last part, even though the Buddha has passed into Parinibbana, this Suba says he takes refuge in the Buddha Gautama, in the Dhamma and the Sangha. And here it just says Sangha, but actually I think the Pali is the Bhikkhu Sangha. When a person takes refuge in the 3 refuges, he takes refuge in the Bhikkhu Sangha, the Sangha of monks. So always remember, we take refuge only with these three, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Bhikkhu Sangha. A lot of people nowadays, instead of taking refuge in the Buddha, which means listening to the Buddha's words, a lot of people, they just listen to the teacher's word, and that is taking refuge in their teacher, not in the Buddha and the Buddha's Dhamma. So okay, we shall end here. Anything to discuss?
Bhante, I would like to ask Bhante to elaborate more on the word consciousness.
This word consciousness, in the suttas, consciousness refers to generally the 6 consciousnesses, the seeing consciousness, the hearing consciousness, the smelling, taste, touch and thinking consciousness, the 6 consciousness at the 6 sense doors, and these 6 consciousness creates the world. The first 5 creates the outer world, the world of sights, sounds, smells, taste, touch. Sights means anything that you see, any form that you see, which is basically the physical world, the world that we see is the sights. Sounds are all the sounds in the world, smells, taste, touch. Touch are the things you touch. And then the last one, the mind, is the inner world. So when we talk about consciousness, vijnana, normally we refer to these 6 consciousness. But there are another 2 terms used in Pali to describe the mind. One is citta, one is mano. Mano refers to the thinking mind, and mano is actually one of the 6 sense organs. The 6th one, the last one, the mind base is called mano, and mano is the thinking mind. And the other word is citta. Citta is a very wide word. It has many meanings. It can mean basically like the whole world is in citta. It's in citta, and also thoughts are also called citta. These are the 3 words referring to the mind: vijnana, mano, and citta. Okay.
Buddha teaches that everything is impermanent. Why is everything impermanent?
Oh, why is everything impermanent? Everything in the world is impermanent. Okay, because everything in the world is basically energy. All things in the world are basically atoms. Atoms are just energy, a form of energy. And atom itself does not cease to be moving. All the things inside an atom are always moving. The protons, electrons, neutrons, photons, mesons, everything. So because basically energy in the world is never stationary, is always moving. So because of movement there is change. So because of change, everything in the world is impermanent. But because our feelings make us like and dislike. Those things that you like, you want it to remain as it is. But unfortunately, it cannot remain as it is. So when it goes away, you have suffering, you have dukkha. And those things that you dislike, you want it to go away immediately, like sickness. But things in the world are beyond our control. That's why the Buddha says, nothing in the world is the self. If anything in the world is the self, the Buddha says, you will have control over it. Just like if money is yours, you can spend it in any way you like. But if it's not yours, then it's beyond your desire to spend it in any way you want, right? So even the body is not yours. When the body falls sick, you cannot decide you want to be well. You have to wait your time, right? Because everything is impermanent. Even what is undesirable, after some time will fade away, will go away. So if we understand this, then whatever happens, we know it is impermanent. It's going to change. So if there is something that you like, so we know we should not be too attached to it, because it's going to go away from us. And if you are attached to it, it's going to give you suffering. And if any suffering comes to you, you also accept it, that it is impermanent. So you know that it will go away. You just have to wait for the time for it to go away. So if you have this understanding, whatever happens to you, your mind is not disturbed. The Buddha says there are two types of suffering: physical suffering and mental suffering. Physical suffering is something that nobody can get rid of. Even the Buddha has physical suffering. Arahants also have physical suffering. That's the nature, is because the nature of the body is to grow old, to become sick, and to die. But mental suffering, the Buddha says, Aryans don't have mental suffering. Aryans understand the nature of the world. So whatever happens, they accept it. So then you don't have mental suffering comes from thinking. If you cannot accept something, then the mind starts to proliferate. One thought becomes 10, 10 becomes 100, 100 thoughts become 1,000. Then that suffering is prolonged. Is there a light? You have to wait. Once after you switch on, you wait a while.
Since consciousness is no more, so it can be mindful.
Sometimes, so the question is, what's the difference between consciousness and mindfulness? It's quite a good question, because nowadays people, a lot of people practice mindfulness meditation, and they think you have to be mindful. Whatever you do, you have to be mindful. That is true, but then they interpret this word sati as mindfulness, as general mindfulness. Actually, general mindfulness we have all the time. We have mindfulness all the time. Whenever anything impinges on your six sense doors, you are mindful. For example, the sound comes to you, you are mindful. Like now you are listening to a Dhamma talk, you are mindful. But suddenly, if outside a car were to sound the horn, pon, very loudly, your attention will be pulled there, and you're also mindful of that. And if a mosquito bites you, even when you're listening to a Dhamma talk, you feel the itch, you're mindful of that. So actually we are mindful all the time. But the problem is, most of the time we are mindful of those things which are not of benefit to us. For example, you are trying to meditate, and your mind starts to think of your office, starts to think about your work, starts to think of your family, and all that. So you are trying to train your mind to be one-pointed. You don't want to think of all these things. But unfortunately, because you don't have a good control of your mind, you are mindful of those things that you should not be mindful of. So sati is not general mindfulness. Sati is to train your mind to put attention on only 4 objects which are beneficial to you. These 4 objects are to be mindful of your body, or the nature of your body, your feelings, or the nature of your feelings, your mind, and the Buddha's Dhamma. Because these are beneficial to you, helps you to reduce your suffering. But if you pay attention to beautiful sights, which people like to pay attention to, nice sounds, fragrant smells, good taste, and nice touch, then the Buddha says that is Mara's bait. Mara is always trying to catch us by putting out these baits at the 6 sense doors. If you pay attention to it, you get caught by Mara, your craving will arise. And if you can't get what you want, you crave for, then grief will follow. That's why the Buddha says always in the suttas you find not to pay not to guard the sense doors in the practice of guarding the sense doors, it is always said that if you don't guard your sense doors, then covetousness and grief will arise. Covetousness means if you're not guarding the six sense doors, you pay too much attention to sight, sound, smells, and all that. Either you crave for those lovely things that attract you at the six sense doors, or if you cannot get them, then grief arises. So you don't want these two states because they are unwholesome states. So the mindfulness that we practice is a specific mindfulness, to put your mindfulness on the right place, namely these four things. Okay. So is that what you asked? Mindfulness and consciousness. Consciousness is general mindfulness. General, you're conscious of whatever comes into your six sense basis. Mindfulness is you can train yourself to direct your mindfulness. Okay? Does that answer your question?
Page 162, paragraph 17.
Yeah.
This the Buddha shares with the Potthapada on the Arupa jhana. Then his advice is he says that he has gained his control perception, and the trick is not to think and imagine, because once you think and imagine, the causal perception will come in. So this is consistent with the second jhana, where thought and sustained thought is application of thought ceases. So, but this is our jhana already, and yet Buddha is still talking about controlling the not thinking. Because I was wondering, once you go beyond the second jhana, won't it be authentic?
Okay. In the second jhana, you are still, in a sense, thinking, because you are putting your attention on this piti and sukha. And when you put your attention on piti and sukha, in the first jhana, you also have piti and sukha. But in the first jhana, the piti and sukha is born of seclusion. And in the first jhana, you have what the Buddha calls skillful thoughts. You still can have skillful thoughts, like trying to tell yourself to remember how to retrace your steps. But in the second jhana, the piti and sukha is born of concentration. And because it is born of concentration, the mind is much stronger. And because the mind is strong in the second jhana, the thoughts cannot arise. But even though the thoughts cannot arise, the monk in that state is clearly aware, clearly mindful of whatever is happening. So, in this cessation of perception, then he decides not even to, here he says to think or imagine, not to move the mind in any way.
Would it be that he is trying not to perceive at all as where the perception stops, and he can control it at that level? Because once at second jhana, the mind is silent already, is never silent. So the mind is ekakata, doesn't move anymore on these days. So but this perception is so fine that I was thinking it's not so much of thinking so pause at thinking. Perhaps it's perceiving.
But you see, even a monk in the second jhana, even though the thoughts have ceased, because the mind is in such a... you can feel the mind is so strong that the thoughts cannot arise. But the will is still there, the will. So, because, for example, even in the second jhana, even though the thoughts don't arise, he can decide he wants to move into the third jhana and all these things. So that is a movement of the mind. It is not thoughts, but there is movement of mind, which he finally decides not to have any will at all. And that's why I said this is volition. As long as you have volition to do this, to do that, the mind is still active, is still mindful. So he doesn't want to exercise any volition at all. Doesn't want to pay attention also. Then slowly the mind will stop. So it is this volition I mentioned that is important. As long as you have any desire at all, any volition at all, the mind will continue to work.
I was wondering, I remember the particular sutta, since it's not up to us whether to predetermine that we will enter the first or second jhana, is it? I cannot remember that particular sutta. It is condition.
No, I think that one is not the first or second jhana, but the state of cessation. Before he enters the state of cessation, he will decide how long he's going to enter the state of cessation.
Just a quick question. Is jhana controllable in the sense of, if let's say I would enter the first jhana, would I, the next meditation session, would I be able to sit down and say, I want to enter the first jhana and immediately in the first jhana, or would I go all the steps?
Only if you have got that kung fu to be able to enter that first jhana or come out of it or enter another jhana. If you haven't trained your mind up to that level, you won't be able to. Even a person attains, for example, the first jhana or second jhana, if he has only just started to attain it, even though he wants to remain in that jhana, he cannot. He will fall out of it because the mind is not strong enough.
But after a while, I'll be controlled.
Yes, yeah.
Just enter it.
Yes, if he's so good at it. That's why in the suttas the Buddha says the Arahant disciples they can attain the 4 jhanas at will. And when they want to, they just sit down, but they have to sit down and concentrate their mind. So we find, for example, in the Maratajanya Sutta in the Majjhima Nikāya, one day our Venerable Mahamoggallana, the monk with the disciple with the greatest psychic power, he was practicing walking meditation, and suddenly he felt the stomach very heavy, as though something was in that stomach. So he decided to check it out. But even though he has great psychic power, he cannot just know. He has to sit down and enter samadhi. Then very quickly he knows that Mara has gone into his stomach.
It seems like in the case of these persons are talking about the 8 jhanas, from there he goes to realize he got all the wisdom insights. And then he actually, you say he realized the form and go and so on and so forth. Does that mean that he actually do Satipatthana or something to contemplate on the form and go through then enlighten?
A person uses Satipatthana to enter the jhanas. you practice Satipatthana, so that Satipatthana means intense state of mindfulness, intense state. Then you attain the jhanas, and then after attaining the jhanas, he attains psychic powers. The Buddha attains, and then on the night of enlightenment, the Buddha looked into the past life. Then he remembered that he was a disciple of the Buddha Kassapa. And then the last watch of the night, he contemplated the Four Noble Truths. Contemplated.
Contemplating means thinking?
In the normal sense, is thinking.
Using a concentrated mind?
Yes, because he doesn't contemplate in jhana. He has to come out of jhana.
Okay. Nikāya is speaking about the acquired self. What is acquired self? There are three kinds of acquired self.
This acquired self is a presumed self. You can say it's a presumed self, and it's also acquired in the sense that the Buddha says basically we have the gross self. But then from the gross self, if he meditates, he can acquire the mind-made self. And then he can acquire the formless self.
So mind self is already in the realm of supernal power.
Yes. In the suttas, the Buddha described how he can make this mind-made self come out from his head, just like drawing a sword from the scabbard, its cover, pulling it out. So when he comes out, he is this mind-made self. So the body is lying there like a shell. So then he can travel with his mind-made self.
Actually, my question is very complex. Let's start with the basic one. Equanimity, we can, there are two types. One is basically the neutral feelings that one gets. The other equanimity, where we is rooted on vipassana, like insight. That equanimity, I'd like to ask something more on the equanimity that one acquired, that one purifies one's view, one gets closer and closer to yata upariyana, that seeing the way things are with closer equanimity, that is being an Aryan. Does one's equanimity in that sense progress as the way we look at things become more and more detached? Is there different levels? It's not so much as the quality that we get from jhana, the neutral feeling.
Equanimity means not allowing the mind to move so much. Now, even an Arahant doesn't mean Arahant is like a stone, does not have feelings. Arahant also has feelings. But in the Majjhima Nikāya, one of the last suttas, the Buddha talked about, I forgot the title already, but basically the Arahant, whatever feelings arise, they subside very fast. But that type of equanimity requires a very strong mind, a mind that has very strong samadhi. Because a person has very strong samadhi, then only whatever feelings arise, it does not shake the mind, because the mind is solid like a rock. So feelings arise lah, but they very quickly they die down. No? So if you just practice vipassana or you understand the Dhamma, if your mind is not backed up with good samadhi, you can move easily. So you got to have wisdom plus samadhi, concentration, to have good equanimity. But like in the state of the fourth jhana, the Buddha describes that you have utter purity of equanimity and sati, mindfulness. So in that state of the fourth jhana, the equanimity is very strong, utterly purified, because there is no sukha and dukkha. Bodily sukha and bodily dukkha is not there. Even mental sukha and mental dukkha is not there. But when a person comes out of the fourth jhana, the mind can still move. So depending on the wisdom, if the person has wisdom in addition to the fourth jhana, then he does not allow the mind to move. But somebody like, for example, Devadatta, he has strong samadhi, but is not balanced with wisdom. So he allows the mind to move. For example, hatred for the Buddha. When the Buddha calls him spittle in front of everybody, then he got so annoyed. So the ego got the better of him. So it's whether you allow the mind to move or not. If you have the wisdom, you don't allow the mind to move. You know what you should do, you do. What you should not do, you don't do. But you don't have that wisdom, then you do what you should not do, like Devadatta.
Somebody was studying when a person gets to the fourth jhana, there is the samadhi or sama samadhi. Then the next step is Aryan. We can, where the mind is pliable, we can actually use it. Takes absolute enough concentration, contemplate on the form of the food. Then we can get. That's
provided you already have a right view.
Yeah.
If you don't have, then you are like an external ascetic. They only acquire the psychic powers. They don't have right view.
That is why in the Bojjhanga Sutta, the last two factors in the Bojjhanga Sutta is not by accident that is the last two, because you have the samadhi and then upekkha. So this upekkha, which means that it's this upekkha where you have an unshakable mind or wisdom. After the samadhi then is upekkha, the second last two factors of the Bojjhanga Sutta.
In the Bojjhanga Sutta, I think the equanimity is like the other factors connected with samadhi. Samadhi.
Yes, I was wondering why samadhi, you have the upekkha within the samadhi itself, it is fourth jhana.
You see, like the other factors like tranquility, all that is also part of samadhi, but they are separately. Okay, shall we end here?